Hi Year 6, Mr Gooding here, just giving you a bit of an update on this week's home learning. Firstly, I hope you're all keeping yourself well. I hope your families are doing the same. I wanted to give you a little update on some of the things from the Google Drive this week to support your learning at home. Firstly, massive thank you to children that have been sending their learning in. Carly sent some fantastic learning about some support around the community, working with Care Home. Toby sent me a Scratch project, thanks for that Toby. I know Fiona, I've got your Scratch project waiting to look at next. Thank you for sending those in. Please do continue to send any home learning in. It really is wonderful to see how you guys are getting on at home, so thank you for that. Please do keep going. Some specifics of the Google Drive this week, some things to direct you to, some top tips to give, and some things to signpost you to continue your learning. So, if we look at this specifically this week, maths this week, we've got some problem solving for you to have a go at. So there are a few tasks on here which are specifically related to problem solving. You're going to need to apply your understanding in a problem solving setting. So we've got a bit of work on fractions, got a bit of work on some percentages around problem solving. Some things to get stuck into there. Again, it's something to have a little go at, and it's something to carry on your learning journey at home. So a few different things there to get started with. I want to signpost you to arithmetic paper as well. I know people in my maths group were always very, very keen to an arithmetic paper. Please do time yourself. Keep really, really sharp on that number work. It's going to support your maths all round. Also, maths challenge. If you do have a go at the maths challenges, please do send us in how you're getting on, how you attempted it, how you tried to deconstruct the question and solve the problem. This week is about peaches. I'll be really, really keen to know how we went about doing that. So, however you go about it, please do send us in your strategy and how you work through it. I'd be really interested to see that. So that's maths for this week. History this week. We start a brand new history topic. History, Miss Ellison has done a separate video for history, explaining this week's history task. So I would like you to head over to that video, look at that specifically, listen to what Miss Ellison has to say about this week's task, and give you a bit more understanding of the first step into our new history topic. That also goes for English this week. So our English this week, we have on here a model text and the writing task itself. There again, is there a separate video for that? So if you look at Mrs. Storney's video from this week, she'll explain in detail about that writing task, as well as talking you through her modelled write and how to be successful in this week's writing. So there are separate videos for that in a bit more detail. So please do head over there when you have a go at those. Now, Toby, I had a go at your, I really enjoyed your Scratch project that came through this week. Fiona, I've got to look at yours next when I get a minute. This week's Scratch task is called Disappearing Dragon. Now, just a top tip for this, just think really, really carefully about the order of which you set up your blocks. Remember, your algorithm, your set of instructions need to be really, really clear to follow. So think about the order of which you lay them out and the order of which you build them to make sure your instruction is really clear. If you want a particular output, the input needs to be really, really clear. So again, if you're successful with it or have a go at it, please do send it in. I'd love to see it. So that's Scratch project for this week. Art this week is, again, to do a little bit of drawing. Last week I saw some fantastic artwork which was sent through. This week we're looking at 3D buildings. So a really, really fun thing to have a go at. It links in with our history topic. You look at that when you go to Miss Ellison's video, you find that that's linked to buildings as well. This would be really, really cool to have a go at. This would be a wonderful opportunity for us to see some of that home learning. So please do have a go at this and follow Mrs. Wood's instructions, and please do send it through. I'd love to see how we've all been successful in our drawing. Spelling this week. Spelling this week is to do with commonly misspelt words. So 25 here to have a little look at. And these are words which they're commonly misspelt. Adults, children, everybody misspell these words because they're difficult. Words like disappearance, preparation, interesting, beautiful, that don't necessarily follow the rules that we look at in school. Some of them are slight anomalies, but I would like you to maybe have a test. Maybe sit down, maybe split them with whoever's at home. Maybe both of you have a go at it. It's something to continue our spelling learning and continue to stay really, really sharp. So worth having a little look at those commonly misspelt words. Okay, that's spelling for this week. There's a STEM task on it this week, which is a really nice one to have a go at. It links into some previous science work we've done around the water cycle. So this is looking at condensation, it's looking at precipitation, but it's a nice one because you don't need a huge amount of equipment. The equipment list is a glass jar you might have around your home. It might be an old pasta sauce, it might be an old candle which you've washed out, but a nice jar, a plate which you've got in the cupboard, a small amount of hot water, just be really careful about that, and some ice cubes. there's some instructions there how you can go about creating this idea of a small-scale weather system, small-scale water cycle within a jar. So that's something to, again, to have a little go at. It's a really fun activity to get a bit hands-on with your science. And yeah, again, something to get stuck into this week. The final couple of things I wanted to talk to you about was this week's science. So this week's science, we're starting a new topic. And our topic for science this time is going to have a direct link to the Titanic. So people are aware of the Titanic, people know what it was, they know the outcome that the ship had. To sort of get started on this unit of work, this week's reading comprehension is linked to the Titanic. So I would suggest doing the reading comprehension first. By doing the reading comprehension, you'll give yourself a little bit of background understanding of what the Titanic was, where it sailed from, where it was supposed to be sailing to, how did it come to an end, and what those sort of things happened. Gives that initial base understanding for the Titanic. So once you've done that, it'll set you up to think more about how that links to our science. So as it's the beginning of our unit, we want to kind of set out of what do we know, what do we understand, and sort of generate some questions really. So the thing we're going to start at is by doing a bit of a comparative test. So comparative, to compare things, look at two different things, is a way of working scientifically. So we're going to focus particularly on this idea of floating and sinking. So the idea of why certain things float, why certain things sink. And we're going to start off by doing a very, very simple practical. So you're going to need, essentially the one thing you're going to need is you're going to need a bowl with some water. Now this could be a bowl, it could be the sink, could be anything that's going to contain some water in it. And what you're going to do is, the example I've given is an orange. Now what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to go and find something you definitely know sinks, or you definitely know floats, because that's not scientific, that's something you already know the answer to. So let's try and find something around the house that you might think, I'm not sure. Does it? I'm not sure. The question mark is there. But this is a comparative test, and I'll explain why. If we have an orange with the skin on, and we place that in the water, you've got to stop and think, what do you think is going to happen? You might think it'll sink, you might think it'll float, but why? What is it? Is it something to do with the skin? Is it something to do with the mass of the object? Is it something to do with the shape of the object? I'd like to jot down what you think will happen. And then you want to take that same object, but in a slightly different form. So in this instance, I've peeled the orange. Will that make any difference? Will it float this time? Will it sink this time? Will it behave differently in the water? So I'm taking the same object, but in two different forms. So an orange is a good one to get started with. But you could do it with, for instance, you could do it with some tin foil. If you had some tin foil, if you put a piece of tin foil flat into the water, I think you know what's going to happen. But what if you scrunch it into a really tight ball? Will it behave differently? What if you had a piece of paper and you folded the piece of paper and put it in the water, and you had a piece of paper which was scrunched into a ball? Would that behave differently? Why? Why would it do the same? Why would it do differently? And that is a comparative test. Once you've gone through that and started to get an idea of how it's behaving in the water, you might come up with some commonalities. You might think these things are behaving the same. And this is where I want to start to think about other objects you might have. So you might find an object around your house. You might think, okay, I've got a piece of paper, I've got a dice, I've got something which is hollow, I've got something which is heavy, I've got something which is light, and something which you might not know the answer to. That's okay. So what I'd like you to do is to, with that bowl of water, think, what objects have I found which float, which objects have I found that sink? And don't find objects which you know the answer to. Try and find some different objects which you're not sure about. That idea of investigation. And then what I'd like you to do, I'd be really interested if we could try and come up with, what is it about these objects? What is common about those objects that float? What do they all have in common? Is there anything they have in common? If there is, what can we find a commonality which makes something float? And the same with making something sink. Do they have something in common? If you find three objects and all of them sink, is there a characteristic of all of them which is the same? And that's going to be the building blocks for our science work. We're going to look at linking that back to the Titanic, when that sailed over 100 years ago. Eventually the Titanic, the unsinkable ship, did sink. I wonder why that was. Maybe you can start to ask yourself some of those questions, which is the foundation of science, asking questions which you don't know the answer to. So something to get started with this week around floating and sinking. Again, if you're successful with it, or we have a go at it, I'd love to hear about it. So please do email that through. So that gives us a bit of an overview of the things which are on the Google Drive this week. I forgot to mention there is another comprehension around Thomas Hardy as well, a very, very famous poet and writer to have a little go at. It's worth keeping in mind about reading as well, about knowing that this is a really good time to get stuck into reading. I know, but this is a good time which I've found, get myself into a routine of reading more and more, which is a really nice thing to do in this otherwise quite strange time. So something to have a little look at. But there is lots and lots there to carry on your learning journeys at home this week. I would love to hear from you if you have a go at them, and stay safe, and hopefully see you guys soon.